much more long? How long? How long? How much more long? How long?
My name is Ebonee Bell, and I had a few thoughts to share with you all today. And these thoughts are about how do we build spiritual bonds of communion across communities and within communities. And the questions that begin this presentation come from a document that was released to the Bahá'í world. And they're questions that come from the first page of that document. And I ask those questions so that we can, here today, think about how we're going to solve some of these problems. So the first question is, how do we forge enduring bonds of love which pulsated in the body of the contingent love? How do we succor and support one another, as well as our brothers and sisters in society at large, as we face challenges among the most daunting that the human family has ever had to face? How do we offer a challenge to the stale assumptions and prejudices of the age, and give stimulus to a process of unification which will continue indefinitely? This is the sort of groundwork that I want us to start thinking about building through community processes like the one we're engaged in today. I also had an answer that I hoped you guys would give me to these questions. Here's what I wanted you guys to say. These are excellent questions, Ebonee. I am so glad that you asked them. I look forward to thinking about and coming up with spiritual solutions to all of these questions today and in the future, so that we can create new systems of behavior, new systems of thought, and new ways to live in harmony with nature and with one another. That's the answer I hope you guys are giving me now. This story comes from my friend Serena. She sent it to me, and it stayed with me. And it haunted me a little bit. And so I thought I would share it with you today. Back during the War of 1812, the British and the Americans were at war. And there was a naval aspect to this war. And the American government told private citizens that if you capture British naval ships, you can have whatever is on board them. So many American privateers set out to try to capture British naval ships because they could have whatever was on board. Coal or liquor or munitions, anything on board you could have. You could make a lot of money that way. And a lot of people went into what we know as piracy. And it was legal because the government said, have it. Well, this man, black man, he's not named in this story. And the man here is not the man in the story. But this black man, he was on board a British ship, and he was an American. And so he set fire to the ship in an attempt to sink it. And by the time the crew members became aware that this fire had been set, it had already spread below deck. And he set it at the dividing wall that was a storage room that contained liquor and gunpowder. And so when the crew found the fire, they sent a crew member down to check, and they discovered what was happening. But the black man, he had an axe and a long knife and a cutlass, and he deeply wounded the crew member. And so the crew member had to retreat back upstairs to tell the crew what was happening. So that's what he did. He retreated back up the stairs. And the first lieutenant came down to check on this black man that was doing all this damage, and he wounded him too. So the first lieutenant was forced to retreat. 3 other crew members followed suit and were forced to retreat. And then this black man decided, well, I'm going to scuttle the boat. To scuttle is to put a hole in the boat so you can sink it. But because the fire was going, the crew had to stop addressing the man who was attacking them and try to put out the fire, because there's going to be an explosion because the fire is now next to the alcohol and the gunpowder. So the black man is scuttling the boat. They're putting out the fire. And after they put out the fire, they're successful in that. They start firing upon a black man who is trying to cut a hole into the bottom of the boat. And the first time they shot at him, it seemed like nothing really happened. And the second time they fired on him, he said, "Not dead yet," and continued to scuttle the boat. And so the captain fires on him, and he says, "Not dead yet," and continues to scuttle this boat. And he receives many shots. Third shot, "Not dead yet." Fourth shot, "Nope, not dead yet." Fifth shot, "Dead yet." How many shots do you think it took for them to get this man to stop scuttling this boat? Someone said 6. That's a good guess, but it's not high enough. 9 is too high. Mr. Gossett had it very close, with 7 shots before he would stop scuttling this boat. But what that I would hate to hear that story if I was a little kid, right? I would hate to hear the story because the black man does not make it through the end of this movie. But he wasn't trying to make it to the end of this movie. He was trying to make sure that that ship did not take him wherever it was going. And so, if you think of that as the goal, then he won the story because that ship could not continue on. It was forced to turn back, and he did not go wherever they were taking it. So he did win from his perspective because it seems clear to me that he wasn't trying to save his own life in this story. And I want you guys to think about that man today who was not dead yet, and he's unnamed, and we won't know his name in history. And I paired that with the story of Chief Sitting Bull. So Chief Sitting Bull goes out in the middle of battle. Bullets are whizzing by him in all directions, and he smokes a pipe full of tobacco. That's as much of the story as I ever knew. I didn't know that he asked 4 warriors to come with him. Now, if it were me and Chief Sitting Bull said, "Ebonee, would you like to come with me to smoke a tobacco pipe in the middle of this war?" First of all, I would go like this. "Oh, me?" Then I would say, "Honorable Chief Sitting Bull, I would so love to smoke a pipe of tobacco with you, but not today. I would like to do that on a different day where there are not bullets flying around all through space." But 4 people joined him. I didn't know. This is the part I didn't know. 4 warriors joined him in that demonstration. And they went out to the middle of the battlefield, and they sat down, and they smoked a pipe together. I would not do this. And the 4 warriors were nervous, of course, but Chief Sitting Bull was not at all. And the 4 warriors hurried through that pipe smoking. They tried to get out of there as quickly as possible, but Chief Sitting Bull wouldn't let them go. And he stayed until the entire pipe was smoked. And then he cleaned out the bowl. And then he left. So that is the part of the story I didn't know, that there are more people in it, that he invited them to join them, and that they said, yes. It is amazing that somebody said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'm not sure it is. But these people who are people who were not afraid of death, you see. In both these examples, we have people who are not afraid of death. Not dead yet. One of my favorite quotes in American history is one that I didn't learn in school. I learned this from a movie that I was showing my own class. So I was teaching the class, and I found this statement, which is my favorite statement in all of American history. And it's from Chief Sitting Bull and Chief Joseph. So Chief Joseph and Chief Sitting Bull had eluded the U.S. government and gone up into Canada. And they had basically won this particular skirmish where they were being pushed, Oregonian and the indigenous population warriors being pushed out onto reservations. And so they got to Canada, and then the U.S. government decided that it was going to send someone to negotiate with them. And so, and this is Chief Sitting Bull's response. He said, "You come here to tell lies. When you go home, take them with you." How many times have someone lied to you and you'd be like, please just go. Oh. And so I've never learned this in school, but I hope that there'll be, maybe it won't happen now that we have critical race theory, but I hope that we would share that story with our children. He made these two other statements, which I could not stop myself from including. If the Great Spirit had desired me to be a white man, he would have made me so in the first place. Yep. And lastly, I want to tell you that if the Great Spirit had chosen anyone to be the chief of this country, it is myself. I read that and I was like, whoa, President Sitting Bull. I'm not trying to imagine America with President Sitting Bull, which I believe we will have someday. We will. But I didn't realize he had said that. And this next part of the presentation is about what we do learn in school, what things are propagated about Native American and African American people, and they're not good. Those things are bad. When we were in Portland, Matt's defender told a medicine story. It was great. It was a great story, that medicine story. And it was a story of a man who, he encounters a monster. And he's able to trick this monster into revealing the things that he is most afraid of. And he does this by saying, brother, is there anything that you're afraid of? The monster is taken aback because here's this man, regular man, who's referring to him as a brother. And so he reveals the things that he's afraid of. He said, well, I don't like it when people do drumming. When people do drumming, I don't like that. It's scary to me. I hope that people won't drum. And the man asked him, well, is there anything else that you're afraid of? He said, I don't like it when people are singing and dancing. I don't like it when people do singing and dancing. That frightens me. And the man once again asked him, is there anything else that you're afraid of? Because I don't like the whistle sound that people make in ceremony. I don't like that. And so, of course, the man runs back to his tribe to tell him all of the things that the monster said he was afraid of so they could do them, so they could keep the monster away. And I listened to this brilliant story and I realized all of those things that the monster was afraid of are things that call upon the Holy Spirit. They're things that ask for the Holy Spirit to be present in our lives and to have divinity within our community. And those are the things that scare the monster away. The disconnect between ourselves and nature, we reverse that. We connect through music and through dance. And then my favorite author, he also made a statement that seems to respond to that story. He said, I'm terrified at the moral apathy, the death of the heart, which is happening in my country. These people have deluded themselves for so long that they really don't think I'm human. I base this on their conduct, not on what they said. And this means that they have become in themselves moral monsters. Again, speaking to that monster that was in that story. Last summer in July, I was asked to host a youth camp. And I called the camp Reconceptualizing Blackness. And the very first day, the very first evening, I asked the children if they could come up with stereotypes of African American people. And of course, at first, they being high schoolers, they were shy. But I told them I had heard it all before, so they didn't have to be shy. And they weren't. And once they got started, they really didn't want to stop. They told me everything. And these are not the things that they said. They said, we must have done that exercise for about 10 minutes, and I couldn't get them to stop either. But these are some of the things that we say about African Americans. We say African Americans are dirty, promiscuous, lazy, stupid, poor, lying. And when I was putting this presentation together, I swear I didn't really think about this beforehand. I thought, oh, these are characteristics that people have said to oppress Black people and they're unique to Black people. But when I put this together, I realized, no, thieving. Actually, any negative trait will also apply to Native Americans. Dirty, promiscuous, lazy, stupid, poor, lying, and thieving. And I realized that not only are these inaccurate statements about these two great communities, but they are actually a reverse projected fear that white people have about themselves. Okay, so this doesn't actually have anything to do with Native or African people whatsoever. Sort of a psychosocial projection. It bounces out of them and it sticks to us, but it shouldn't. So these are statements that people in history have made about African American and Native American people. They're negative statements. Indian wolves are both beasts of prey, though they differ in shape. Anyone have a guess about who said that? George Washington. And you are correct, sir. Very good. We have some scholars in the house. This is good. Now, as to the Negroes, I entirely agree with you that as a race and in the mass, they are altogether inferior to the whites. Anyone know? No, this is Teddy Roosevelt. Good guesses, though. To see those monkeys from those African countries, damn them. Somebody in modern times, a good guess. It is Reagan. Very good. They have neither the intelligence, the industry, the moral habits, nor the desire of improvement, which are essential to any favorable change in their condition. Established in the midst of another and a superior race, and without appreciating the causes of their inferiority or seeking to control them, they must necessarily yield to the force of circumstances and ere long disappear. Anyone have a guess? It's Andrew Jackson's. I was reading in Dawn of Everything, which is a reimagining of the history of the world, about early Native American contact with European society. There was a man named Kandiaron, and he lived in Canada, and he interacted with the French, and he was unimpressed with the French. And this is what he says. Do you seriously imagine that I would be happy to live like one of the inhabitants of Paris, to take 2 hours every morning just to put on my shirt and makeup, to bow and scrape before every obnoxious galoot I meet on the street who happened to have been born with an inheritance? Do you really imagine I could carry a purse full of coins and not immediately hand them over to people who are hungry? That I would carry a sword but not immediately draw it on the first band of thugs I see rounding up the destitute to press them into naval service? We learn about the critiques that are offered against us, but we don't learn what we said in response. So this is what he said. He was like, yeah, well, not that impressed. This one I only learned about in my adult life. It's by David Walker. He made a pamphlet which he was distributing. It was banned, this pamphlet that he made. He would pass it out to African Americans. See your declaration, Americans. Do you understand your own language? I love that. Do you understand the words that are coming out of your mouth? Hear your language proclaimed to the world July 4th, 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that are among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Compare your own language above, extracted from your Declaration of Independence, with your cruelties and murders inflicted by your cruel and unmerciful fathers and yourselves on our fathers and on us, men who have never given your fathers or you the least provocation. This was in his pamphlet that he made and circulated in 1829. I mean, I bet none of us learned that in history class. This is Kandiaron again. I have spent 6 years reflecting on the state of European society, and I still can't think of a single way they act that's not inhuman. And I genuinely think that this can only be the case as long as you stick to your distinctions of mine and thine. I affirm that what you call money is the devil of devils, the tyrant of the French, the source of all evils, the bane of souls and slaughterhouse of the living. To imagine one can live in the country of money and preserve one's soul is like imagining one could preserve one's life at the bottom of a lake. Money is the father of luxury, lasciviousness, intrigues, trickery, lies, betrayal, insincerity, of all the world's worst behavior. Note where he thinks all those terrible words that I show you in Ebonee are coming from. Not from Native and African people. Lately Long Soldier is a friend of mine, and I saw her on the news reciting this poem. And I'm going to let her tell it. The poem is called Whereas.
Whereas a string-bean, blue-eyed man leans back into a swig of beer, work-weary lips at the dark bottle, keeping cool in short sleeves and khakis, he enters the discussion. Whereas his wrist loosed at the bottleneck to come across as candid. Well, at least it was an apology, that's all I can say, he offers to the circle, each of them scholarly. Whereas under starlight, the fireflies wink across East Coast grass, and me, I sit there, painful in my silence, glued to a bench in the midst of the American casual. Whereas a subtle electricity in that low purple light, I felt their eyes on my face, gauging a reaction, and someone's discomfort leaks out in a well-stated, "Shit." Whereas, like a bird darting from an oncoming semi, my mind races to the apology's assertion. While the establishment of permanent European settlements in North America did stir conflict with nearby Indian tribes, peaceful and mutually beneficial interactions also took place. Whereas I crossed my arms and raised a curled hand to my mouth, as if thinking, as if taking it in, I allow a static quiet, then choose to stand up, excusing myself, I leave them to unease. Whereas I drive down the road, replaying the get-together, how the man and his beer bottle stated their piece, and I reel at what I could have said or done better. Whereas I could have, but didn't, broach the subject of genocide, the absence of this term from the apology, and its rephrasing as conflict, for example. Whereas, since the moment had passed, I accept what's done, and the knife of my conscience pierces with bone-clean self-honesty. Whereas in a steered conflict between settlers and an Indian that night in a circle. Whereas I struggled to confess that I didn't want to explain anything. Whereas, truthfully, I wish most to kick the legs of that man's chair out from under him. Whereas to watch him fall backwards, legs flailing, beer stench across his chest. Whereas I pictured it happening in cinematic, slow motion, delightful. Whereas the curled hand I raised to my mouth was a sign of indecision. Whereas I could have done it, but I didn't. Whereas I admit that this also took place, yes, at least.
That was Lately Long Soldier reading her poem Whereas, which is a response to the apology to Native Americans. This is a piece of a performance by Saul Williams. This is a middle section of a longer recitation that he did for Deaf Poetry Jams.
Whereas break beats have been the missing link connecting the diaspora community to its drum-woven past. Whereas the quantized drum has allowed the whirling mathematicians to calculate the ever-changing distance between rock and stardom, we do hereby declare reality unkept by the changing standards of dialogue. Statements such as, keep it real, especially when punctuating or anticipating modes of ultra-violence inflicted psychologically or physically, would henceforth be seen as retroactive and not representative of the individually determined is. Because better realize, now is the time to self-actualize. Studies show that when a given norm is changed in the face of the unchanging, the remaining contradictions will parallel the truths. Equate rhyme with reason, sun with season. Reject mediocrity. Your current frequencies of understanding outweigh that which has been given for you to understand. The current standard is the equivalent of an adolescent restricted to the diet of an infant. The rapidly changing body would acquire dysfunction and formative symptoms that could not properly mature on a diet of applesauce and crushed pears. Light years are interchangeable with years of living in darkness. The role of darkness is not to be seen as or equated with ignorance, but with the unknown and the mysteries of the unseen. Thus, in the name of Robeson, Godson, Hurston, Akhenaten, Hatshepsut, Blackfoot, Helen, Lennon, Paulo, Tully, the three Marias, Tara, Lilith, Lord, Whitman, Baldwin, Ginsburg, Kaufman, Lumumba, Gandhi, Gibran, Shabazz, Siddhartha, Medusa, Guevara, Gurdjieff, Rand, Wright, Banneker, Tubman, Hamer, Holiday, Davis, Coltrane, Morrison, Joplin, Du Bois, Clark, Shakespeare, Rachmaninoff, Ellington, Carter, Day, Hathaway, Hendricks, Cootie, Dickerson, Riveting, Mary, Isis, Teresa, Hansberry, Tesla, Plath, Rumi, Bellini, Michaud, Nostradamus, Nefertiti, Laurent, Shiva, Ganesha, Yemaya, Oshun, Ogatala, Ozone, Trinity, King, Four Little Girls, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Keller, Biko, Perone, Marley, Magdalene, Cosby, Shakur, those who burn, those still aflame, and the countless unnamed. Reclaim the present as the present, as the hereafter. We are unraveling our nables so that we may ingest the sun. We are not afraid of the darkness. We trust that the moon shall guide us. We are determining the future at this very moment. We know that the heart is the philosopher's stone. Our music is our alchemy. We stand as the manifested equivalent of 3 buckets of water and a handful of minerals, thus realizing that those very buckets turned upside down supply the percussive factor of forever. Let your children name themselves and claim themselves as the new day. For today, we are determined to be the channelers of these changing frequencies into songs, paintings, writings, dance, drama, photography, carpentry, crafts, love, and love. We enlist every instrument, acoustic, electronic, every so-called gender, race, sexual preference, every person as beings of sound to acknowledge their responsibility to uplift the consciousness of the entire world. Any utterance unaimed will be disclaimed, will be maimed. 2 rappers slain.
At first I thought it was a list of people. But then he says ISIS. And he says Yanayan. And he says Obatala, which are gods of the West African canon. So it's not just a list of people. There were cities in that list. It wasn't just black people. It was white people. I was like, I don't understand that list. I don't think. But I love hearing the list. And I love his delivery. And I love what he has to say. And if you ever get a chance, you can go back and hear the whole thing on YouTube. What does the Baha'i faith say about these 2 communities, which I will quickly go through? In the light of divine guidance, if the light of divine guidance enters properly into the lives of the Indians, it will be found that they will arise with great power and will become an example of spirituality and culture to all the people in all these countries. Particularly do the Master and the Guardian, 2 of the leaders of the Baha'i faith, point to the Afro-Americans and the Amerindians, 2 great ethnic groups whose spiritual powers will be released through their response to the creative word. The peoples of Europe have not advanced to the higher planes of moral civilization, as their opinions and behavior clearly demonstrate. Notice, for example, how the supreme desire of European governments and peoples today is to conquer and crush one another, and how, while harboring the greatest secret repulsion, they spend their time exchanging expressions of neighborly affection, friendship, and harmony. It is a great mistake to believe that because people are illiterate or live primitive lives, that they are lacking in either intelligence or sensibility. On the contrary, they may well look on us with the evils of our civilization, with its moral corruption, its ruinous wars, its hypocrisy and conceit, as people who merit watching with both suspicion and contempt. And you'll remember Kandiarak was contemptuous. The Universal House of Justice is deeply concerned about the welfare of Indian people of America and yearns to see them take their rightful place as a significant element in the spiritualization of humanity, the construction of a unified world, and the establishment of a global civilization. And lastly, this statement from Abdul Baha. Baha'u'llah once compared the colored people to the black pupil of the eye, surrounded by the white. In this black pupil, you see the reflection of that which is before it, and through it, the light of the Spirit shines forth. And lastly, let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. Chief Sitting Bull again. By the conclusion of the new series of plans recently begun, the Baha'i community will need to have acquired capacities that can scarcely be glimpsed at present. I hope we will build those capacities here this afternoon. Thank you, everyone.